Right, you've done it. So you're essentially finished Act Three, and there's two possible outcomes that can occur at this stage. Really, they either book the appointment or they raise an objection. And there's different things that we need to do with each. So if they book the appointment, now is when you can ask the questions that you must ask in order to deliver the service. So these are questions like, what is your date of birth? If you haven't already asked in regards to the problem. What is your address? Do you have private medical insurance? Do you need directions on how to find us? Do you have any other further questions about what happens at the consultation? Or you might give them things to avoid, things that they shouldn't do prior to the consultation itself, or things that they might have to consider that happen after the consultation, things that they might need to avoid after that. That's all now is when you can say that. You've accomplished the mission, which is essentially asked about, gotten the appointment. They should also be happy by at this point. You'll notice, in fact, that many times they'll be quite relieved at this stage, feeling like they have found a really good provider. They've had a good conversation with somebody. They trust you. They like you. And they feel like they are excited about taking the next step. And now as well, you're in a much better position to get them to reveal for you any kind of more sensitive sort of objective information that they might need to. And they'll be more open to you to provide them with the information that you need to give them in order to take the next step, which is the appointment. Now, if they don't book, that's when things get a little bit tricky. And this is where we would need to get into objection handling. I'm just going to give you really, really briefly an introduction to what objection handling is about and what's involved. Okay, so generally speaking, what we're doing when it comes to objection handling is we first of all need to understand specifically what the objection is. Like I said before, objections are typically requests for information. In other words, there's a piece of information that they just simply don't have yet. So it's like a question in disguise. For example, if somebody says, well, I'm just a little bit scared at the moment. Well, that could simply mean, can you tell me a little more about the side effects? Or can you tell me more about the risks that are involved? Or if we're talking about eye surgery, might I go blind? Or if we're talking about dental surgery, it might be, is it going to really hurt? Or if we're talking about cosmetic surgery, it might be, are the results going to be really noticeable? Again, we want to be able to distinguish between objections related to the treatment versus versus objections related to the appointment. We want to make sure that the objections related to the treatment are handled at the appointment. That's the time to handle them. The patient doesn't even really have to worry about this until they visit the appointment. Objections related to the appointment, however, that's what you can handle. And usually those are questions surrounding, how long might it take me to get there? And how long will the appointment be? And will I have enough time to fit this into my schedule? Or, can I afford the appointment? Can I afford the whole thing so that, whether I should come to the appointment? Are you qualified for me to have this appointment with you? Is it going to be a waste of time? Those are the kinds of unanswered questions that might arise. So the first step really is clarifying what the objection is. You have to know, what is it that is the issue? Even if it's, I want to think about it, surely there is something behind that. You might say, well, it sounds like there's something that's causing you some concern. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is? Once you've identified what it is that they're thinking about, then you're able to better address that like a real question as it should be asked, and then answer that question. Now, after they give you an objection, it's very important that you empathize. You almost want to agree with the objection a little bit. So if somebody says to you, well, I'm really scared. Well, instead of saying, well, don't worry, there's nothing to be scared about, you might actually do a little bit of a more empathetic approach and say, I can appreciate how you might feel scared. In fact, many people feel the same way. However, once they've found what it's all about, once they've come into the clinic and met us and understood a little bit more about what's involved, they find that fear dissipating and they feel a little bit more comfortable about moving forward. In fact, coming into the appointment can help dispel some of that fear and make them feel less scared. So in essence, what you're doing there is you're offering the appointment as an antidote to the objection that they have about the treatment. And you can do that with so many things. If they have questions about the technology, you can tell them that the appointment is a great opportunity to explore that. If they have questions about safety, you can tell them that asking the experts is the best time to actually be doing that. If they have concerns about results, you can tell them, well, at the appointment, we're able to show you much more clarity on what results you can expect for yourself. So pretty much any objection that they might have might be, in fact, a reason to offer the appointment. So that's the second step, which is empathy. Now, you also want to isolate these objections. And what I mean by that is you want to ask them, well, is there anything else that's causing you any concern? If there is, you want to list those objections. So what else? Well, it might be safety. It might be they're worried about the technology. They might be worried about the expertise. They might be worried about the price. They might be worried about the convenience. They might be worried about the pain, all sorts of things. We want to get a list out. That's really the fourth step, which is listing. We want to list all those objections out on the table, and we want to handle them in turn. Once we've handled them, we can say to the patient, okay, well, if that's out of the way, let's deal with number 2. And once you've handled that, you say, now that that's out of the way, let's deal with number 3. And that's how you go through the process of overcoming the objection, which is really the 5th step. When you're overcoming the objection, try to avoid overcoming the objection with logic. Logic only goes so far. Logic is something people need to justify emotional decisions. What you want to do is you want to go towards the emotions. You want to remember, what are the things that they want to do this for? What is their dominant buying motive? Why do they want to have this? What is the past motivating incident? What's the future motivating event? What's the pain? What's the gain? Get them to think about things in perspective. When people actually apply perspective to their fears or to their stalls, they begin to see those fears and stalls as for what they are. They're much smaller in light of what the great effects and what the great results they can achieve when they put things into perspective. So that's how you best overcome an objection. Lastly, you want to close the door on the objection. So you want to make sure that the patient has understood that you've overcome the objection. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable with the feeling that that objection no longer exists. And you want to make sure that you finish by asking them if they agree that that objection is out of the way. I could spend a whole day talking about objection handling. And in fact, most people find that the most difficult thing about handling telephone calls and appointments. We'll hope to do that with you one day, whether it's in video or live. I find that it's much more difficult to get into objection handling unless you've got the fundamentals down. And the fundamentals is precisely what we've spoken about in this video series.